Have you ever heard of Peter Piper? He picked a peck of pickled peppers. And today we're going to be talking about planting, placement, pruning, and pinching for possessing a prodigious pepper production. Happy World Naked Gardening Day 2021. Yep, that's a thing. So we're going to keep it G-rated here on YouTube. I half celebrated over on Instagram and in our new private Facebook group. Still PG, I'm not going to get crazy. So even though we're keeping things G-rated here on YouTube, we're going to heat things up by talking about peppers. Peppers, chilies, capsicums, whatever you want to call it, they're one of my favorite things to grow. And there's so many different types. But there are a few things to do other than just plopping them in the ground and watching them and waiting them to produce a bumper crop. Let me know in the comments if you've grown peppers before and you have a tip that you would like to share to produce a lot of peppers. Bonus if it starts with a P. All right, so let's get to my 4 P's of pepper production. The first P is placement. Peppers like 6 to 8 hours of sunlight, direct sun, with a little shade in the afternoon. Sometimes that afternoon sun comes in really hot, and once you've got fruit on your plants and they're almost ripe, you're going to get sun scald. And so it's nice to have a little bit of afternoon shade to protect them from that. But other than that, they really like a lot of sunlight. They also like a rich, moist root run. Don't let them dry out very much. Mulch is going to go a long way to keeping the soil evenly damp. Now, usually I tell you to stick with the spacing that they give you on the seed packet. For peppers, I'm going to go against that recommendation because peppers don't mind growing a little closer together. In fact, they seem to produce better when they're growing side by side in pairs. That alone doubles your crop, right? Because you're planting almost 2 times the amount of peppers in the same space as if you were to listen to the seed packet. The second P is planting. You've got to plant them correctly from the get-go. And the first thing about planting is the timing of the planting. Peppers do not like to be cold at all. And forget your last frost date. Peppers like it warmer than that. So you have to wait maybe several weeks after your last frost date to get peppers into the ground. They like temperatures, nighttime temperatures, of no less than 55, 65 being optimal. If you put your peppers out too early and they are allowed to sit out in the cold like that, it can stunt their growth and they may never recover. When you plant, you want to put some phosphorus in the hole. Phosphorus is the middle number on any container of fertilizer, and it doesn't move freely through the soil. Peppers are pretty notorious for taking any amount of nitrogen they can get and using it all up on fast, thick, lush green growth at the expense of fruit. We don't want that. So I just put some phosphorus in the hole, rock phosphate, and a little bit of bone meal, about a handful of each, right under the roots of the plant. Peppers are probably the only crop that I don't use Neptune's Harvest, crab and lobster, and kelp meal for, just because of the nitrogen level. However, throughout the season, before the plants start to really produce their flowers and fruit, I'm going to use the tomato and veg formula from Neptune's Harvest every 2 weeks. And then once they have, I'm trying this new this year per Neptune's Harvest recommendation. Once the plants have their flowers starting and their fruit, I'm going to switch to their rose and flowering formula, which has a much higher number of phosphorus and potassium, which has a direct result on the quality, the size, the amount of flowers than fruit. Now, if you want to, you can just stick with the tomato and veg. That's what I've done every year, and just kind of watch me this year to see how it works. Now, the third P is pruning. Now, this is a bone of contention between gardeners. Should you prune or should you not prune? I always prune because, in my opinion, the more branching you have, the more points of flowering, and the more points of flowering, the more fruit. Now, to get more branching, you have to prune the top out of the plant. If you take a look at this plant right here, it grows pretty much straight up, right? That is because all of the growth hormone is in the tip of the plant. So it just keeps growing straight up. Because after all, the plant's main goal is not to provide you full branches of fruit. It is to reproduce and to produce seeds. And so it wants to rush to do that, much like lettuce. When it bolts, it shoots skyward, flowers, and it's done. So that's what it's trying to do here. So once the plant has about 6 leaves, not including the seed leaves that it starts with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So right here, you can pinch out any or clip out anything above that. So I'm going to go ahead and clip this right here. It might be painful to do, but trust me, you're going to be happy you did it. Now what happens is the growth hormone flows back down through the stem to each one of these leaf nodes. And if you take a look, you can see right here in the little armpits, there's some little growth there already starting. Now that the hormone goes back down to them, those are all going to produce side branches. You can take a look at this pepper I've got right back here. It was topped about 3 weeks ago, and you can see all of the branching that has occurred. It is not one long stem from bottom to top. So it just makes sense. I've been doing my peppers that way for years, and I would never do it any other way. Now the 4th P is pinching. For the first 2 weeks after you put the plant out in the garden, you want to pinch off any flower buds that appear. You don't want the plant putting its energy into flower and fruit production. You want the plant producing roots for a strong season. After that 2 weeks, then it's okay to let the flowers come on and produce fruit. Now, could be a 5th P, which would be picking. I'm going to include it here under pinching. You want to pick off the first 5 or 6 fruits before they have a chance to fully ripen. So if it's a red bell pepper, as soon as you start seeing it turn from green to red, just a little bit of blush happening, pick it. 5 or 6 of those, what that's going to do is that's going to continue to stimulate the plant to produce more and more and more. Now, if you don't like green peppers, I do not like green peppers, you can still ripen the fruit once it's been taken off of the plant. In fact, a great way to do it is put the fruit in a paper bag with a ripe tomato. Store it at about 70 degrees, and about 2 weeks after that, it will be completely red, or whatever color it's supposed to be, and you can enjoy it as a sweet pepper rather than a more spicy, bitter pepper. If you learned something from these 4 Ps, please give the video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel and pushes this video out to a wider audience. Consider subscribing if you haven't, and I will see you next time.